Hey, everybody. It looks like I'm live now. My goodness, I was having some technical difficulties and nothing was working. So I'm sorry, I'm a couple minutes late here. It appears it's 7:06 right now, so I apologize for the lateness of this. Uh, Try to be on time. Let me test this out here. There we go. Well, today is Wednesday, and this is a whiteboard, and that means it's time once again for Whiteboard Wednesday. Very special Whiteboard Wednesday because I've decided, um, after asking questions and topics people wanted to talk about, a lot of the topics seemed to center around a very specific book in the Bible, the book of Revelation. uh, Looks like, oh, Crystal's there, Carol's there. Hey guys, hopefully you can hear me. I got a new microphone. Maybe that's what threw off my. Maybe that's what threw off my. Hi, Fee. Maybe that's what threw off my. I don't know. It was nothing was working a couple minutes ago, but now it's working. So it could also have to do with the fact that I'm speaking about the book of Revelation, and there are certain powers and principalities that don't like you to speak about the book of Revelation, and so maybe there's some monkey wrenches being thrown in the works here, but we don't know. Okay. One of the questions that prompted us talking about this, and I was thinking about doing this. I've been talking about it for a while. Hey, we need to spend a couple weeks on Revelation. A lot of questions about that book. Very confusing book. One of the most confusing books in the Bible, the book of Revelation. I think that gets the prize for the most confusing. But I might also give first place to the book of Zechariah. Go ahead and try to read the book of Zechariah. It gives the book of Revelation a run for its money. And, um, well, Zechariah is up there. Ezekiel's tough too. Boy, I have a problem with Ezekiel sometimes, and some of the other prophets. Uh, but Revelation is definitely the hardest one in the New Testament to understand. And hey, Diane Lambert's tuning in too. Good to see everybody here. But let's just jump into it. But we're going to spend a couple weeks on Revelation, because we've been getting a lot of questions about it. And one of the questions that prompted this, us starting this, is a question about someone who, or a particular person who everybody's very interested in, and that person goes by the name of Antichrist. I'm sure that's not their name, like that's not on their driver's license, but got several questions about this. Who is it? What are they going to do? And well, just a lot of questions. So let's dive into it. But for us to understand the Antichrist, we're going to need to look in the book of Revelation. So I'm going to answer this question along with many others as we dive into the book of Revelation and hopefully get a better understanding of it and a better understanding of a lot of these questions that people are asking. Now, this is going to take a couple weeks, and it's going to get a little complex. We're going to have to put on our thinking caps because we don't, well, for several reasons. And I'll get into those. Now, I've got a list of, one of the things I'd like to show you guys is a list of characters from the book of Revelation. I've got a list of the good guys. I wrote a list of the characters in the book of Revelation. Here's the good guys that we find in the book: John, the Lamb, the seven churches, seven angels, seven seals. Those aren't really characters, I guess. Seven trumpets, not really characters either. The 144,000, and the woman clothed in the sun or with the sun. Okay, so those are the kind of the good guys from the book of Revelation. And then here I wrote a list of the bad guys, maybe I could say, in the book of Revelation, the bad characters. Here they are: the dragon, the beast from the earth, the beast from the sea, the four horsemen. Maybe you heard of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and the harlot, or the whore of Babylon, as the King James calls her. Now, so here's our main characters for the book of Revelation. And by the way, as we're going this, feel free to type in the comments here. I'm able to see comments as they pop in. And even if you're not watching live, if you put comments either in the stream or send me a message. I can address them in later videos, even if it's not live. So that all works. Now, right away, I'm noticing a problem here with the list of characters that I looked at. Well, here's the bad guys, let's say. Here's the bad guys. Oops. The bad guys of Revelation. Who's missing from this list? You know what I don't see is anybody called the Antichrist. Now, this is very fascinating. The book of Revelation does not have the word or does not mention the person Antichrist. Little fun fact for you. Okay? Antichrist, at least if he is in the book of Revelation, he's not called the Antichrist, or she, or it, is not called the Antichrist. So where do we get this term Antichrist from? Well, we get it from the Bible, but we don't get it from the book of Revelation. So, little fun fact for you. We're going to start our study of Revelation off with this little fun fact. Thought it'd be fun. Who is the Antichrist? Where do we get this information about the Antichrist? I am putting on your screen, make sure my webcam is real close. My head looks especially big today. Sorry about the size of my head, everybody. Right now, what you see on your screen is everything that the Bible says about the Antichrist. There are 4 verses in the Bible that talk about the Antichrist. It's in 1 John, 3 times in 1 John, and 1 time in 2 John. That's it. So, the Antichrist, a lot of people are very... talk a lot about the Antichrist. Let's read about this guy. Even if he doesn't show up in the book of Revelation, let's read about this guy, because maybe he is there and he's just not called the Antichrist in the book of Revelation. Does that make sense? Here's what the Antichrist does. All right, 1 John 2:18. Little children, he's talking to the church. Little children, it is the last hour. John is considering, as he's writing in the 1st century AD, that it is the last hour. Hey, Shannon, good to see you there. Little children, it is the last hour, and as you have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now, there are many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time. So the first time we hear anything about the Antichrist is in 1 John. It's a little tiny book, take you about 5 minutes to read it, and he's warning the church, hey, we know that Antichrist shall come, and we also know that even now, there are many Antichrists. There are many Antichrists even now. Here's the other things we say about the Antichrist. Who is the liar? But the one who denies that Jesus is the Christ. This is the Antichrist. The one who denies the Father and the Son. So, obviously, that's what the word means, right? If you just look at what the word means. Who is the Antichrist? It's whoever it is, they are anti what? They are anti-Christ, right? They're not for Christ, they're against Christ. The Antichrist denies that Jesus is the Christ, or the Christ is the word for the Messiah, the chosen one. They deny that Jesus is the Messiah, and they deny the Father and the Son. Okay, they are anti-Christ. Like if you don't like me, you'd be anti-Chad. But this person is anti-Christ. And maybe it's not even this person, because remember what he said earlier. There are many antichrists. Here's the third thing we learned about the Antichrist. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. And every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, of whom you heard that is coming, and now is already in the world. Okay, so kind of the same thing, right? If someone is confessing that Jesus is the Christ, he is the Messiah, and he has come in the flesh from God, that Jesus is not like a spirit or something, or he's like, that's the idea. Some people will say this. God, Jesus is like, Jesus is God, but everybody's God. Jesus is just kind of a spiritual thing. No. That's Antichrist. Christ came in the flesh and he is from God. Every spirit that does not confess that is not from God. And here's the spirit of the Antichrist. This is the spirit of the Antichrist. So we know that the Antichrist, we know we're learning a couple things here. Can you still read my writing? Yeah. We know one, I'll just say he's coming. We know two, he's here now in a sense. He's been here since John. John seems to think he's there. There are many antichrists. And at least if he's not here now, let's say, let's give this a 2A. He's at work. We can at least say that. He's at work now. His spirit is at work. There are many antichrists, plural, Christs, and this is the spirit of the Antichrist. Anybody who is antichrist, we know is operating under the spirit of the Antichrist, and maybe we could say they are one of the many antichrists. Here's the last thing we hear about the Antichrist in the Bible. Many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess that Jesus had come in the flesh. Any such person is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Again, this is John. I'm not making this up. This is the Apostle John, the guy who followed Jesus around. Any such person is the Antichrist. Okay? So again, there's apparently, the first time we hear about him, we have heard that Antichrist shall come. But we also know that any person who is this is the Antichrist, or at least operating under the spirit of the Antichrist. Very interesting. Okay. This kind of answers the question of who is Antichrist. There are lots of Antichrists, and I'm sure we can think of lots of examples of people who are Antichrist, right? People who are against Christ or opposed to Christ. Nevertheless, there is this idea that Antichrist shall come. All right, so this brings us now to the book of Revelation. So let's go back to the book of Revelation, and we're going to look at our cast of. Oops, I might have messed up my thing. Yeah, here we go. We're going to look at the cast of characters. Here's who we got to choose from. Here's who we read about in the book of Revelation: the dragon, the beast from the earth, the beast from the sea, the 4 horsemen, and the harlot. Well, maybe one of these guys are the Antichrist. I'm going to leave you on a little cliffhanger here, and we're going to start, but we're going to take a step back now. We're going to take a step back now. But this is the kind, I wanted to start with that because it kind of shows how difficult it can be to dig into the book of Revelation. Because a lot of people have ideas about what's in the book of Revelation and what's supposed to happen, or even that the book of Revelation describes what's supposed to happen. But we really should care about, well, what's actually in the book? What's actually in the book of Revelation? So it can be difficult. We got to kind of wade through some preconceived ideas. Like maybe you didn't realize that Antichrist, or at least the word, is not in the book of Revelation. Well, that's good to know. Let's first, before we start figuring out who the Antichrist is, we should figure out what that means, and whether or not the book of Revelation is even trying to talk about it. And I think the book of Revelation is mentioning it, but it doesn't use that in that many words. All right, here's an issue with reading the book of Revelation. I could just read any verse from the book of Revelation, and you would know already. Maybe you tried to read the book of Revelation, and one of the issues is it's confusing. It doesn't seem to be written like any other book in the Bible, although it is written like the book of Daniel, the book of Zechariah, parts of Ezekiel. They also use imagery like that, but that's the problem. Here's the problem. It uses imagery that we're not familiar with. It would be like if we gave somebody in the gospel in John's time or Jesus's time, like a science fiction or something. They would say, "What is all this about?" You know, we kind of understand that what science fiction is, But in the same way they would not understand what science fiction is, we have a hard time understanding what in the world Revelation is. So what is the book of Revelation? Here's the starting point. Here's where we're going to start. What is the book of Revelation? Let me clear this off here. First of all, here's a little pet peeve of mine, and Shannon asks, does the original language directly translate to Antichrist? And the answer is yes. In the Greek, it's going to be, my Greek is not the best. I'm not even going to try reading it, but it's Antichristos. So it's almost literally, it's Antichristos in the Greek. So very literally Antichrist. It's where we get the word Antichrist. It's straight from the Greek. So it is the case, yeah, that it does translate into Antichrist. So it's a good translation. It's not like a mistranslation. But here's one of my pet peeves of the book of Revelation. It's the last book in our Bible, right? And it is called the book of Revelation. Notice what is missing. There is no S in the book of Revelations, although everybody says that. I think it might be a Midwest thing. It's the book of Revelation. There are not many revelations in the book, and this is why it's one of my pet peeves. The book of Revelations sounds like it's lots of different visions and lots of different revelations. It's not. And if you read just the very first verse of the book, John says, this is the revelation of Jesus. This is the one revelation of Jesus. It's not multiple revelations. Now, you may not care about that, and I suppose I shouldn't care about it too much, because we just add S onto the end of everything in the Midwest. I don't know if you do that too, Fee, but like if we go to Meijer, we don't really go to, it's called Meijer, but we go to Meijers, right? It's called Kroger, but we don't call it Kroger, we call it Kroger's. We just put an S on the end of it. Or Walmart's. People say Walmart's even. It's not Walmart's, it's Walmart. So maybe that's all it is. But it is nevertheless the book of Revelation. What is the book of Revelation? It is, here's what it is. It's a letter. Sounds funny, but John, that's exactly what John says it is. It's a revelation, and it's written to seven churches that existed at the time of John, at the time John was writing it. Jesus says, write these, or at least the angel says, write this letter to the seven churches. Okay, so it's a letter, fine, and it's written to specific churches, all well and good, but this imagery is very different. Yeah, people say Happy New Year's. They say that here too. Yeah, Happy New Year's. It's Happy New Year, right? We just put an S on everything. That's a good example of that. The imagery is, here's a fancy word for you guys, apocalyptic. Okay, so this is, if we're asking what the genre is, like, when I read the book of Revelation, is this fiction? Is it nonfiction? Is it science fiction? It does sound like science fiction. Is it fantasy? Is it fairy tale? There's all sorts of different genres, and depending on the genre you're reading, is it a newspaper account? Is it a newspaper report? All these are different ways of writing things, and different genres, and you read different genres differently. The genre of the book of Revelation is apocalyptic. Revelation is not the only apocalyptic book that ever existed. The apocalyptic literature was very popular with Jewish and Christian audiences before the time of Jesus. Let's say, this is a ballpark. Let's say 300 BC to about the time a little bit after Jesus. So there's a period of about 400 years where people were writing apocalyptic books and apocalyptic visions. They'd write these things down. Maybe a rabbi would, or a teacher would, and they would use these kind of what we would call fantastic imagery, dragons and stars, and the sun is boiling, and things like that. All this imagery means something within the genre of apocalyptic literature. So it is tough for us to understand, but it's not impossible for us to understand. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. So we're gonna so this is what the book of Revelation is, right? It's a letter, it's apocalyptic, and it's also, if I could add a third thing, it's also a prophecy. He says it's a prophecy. And prophecy is two things. One, it says how God feels about something. And also, a prophecy talks about what will happen. So prophecy is not all just telling the future. A lot of times when you read the prophets, they're not saying what's going to happen in the future. They're telling you how God feels about a certain thing. So that's something we just kind of get confused about prophecy as well. So this is what the book of Revelation is. Okay, I'm not giving up. I'm going kind of too in depth here. I'm not teaching a class on Revelation. This is just a Whiteboard Wednesday. And if I'm not careful, we're gonna spend way too much time. This is my downfall here. Okay, real quick before I get into some of the other things, how do we interpret the book of Revelation? Historically, there are four different ways people have understood what Revelation is talking about. One is the historicist approach. Okay, what does this mean now? It's not exactly clear what Revelation's talking about a lot of the times. Some places it is, but some places it's not. A historicist will come to the book of Revelation, and they will look to history to see when these things took place. So the historicist is going to look at the Revelation and say, where are we right now? So they would say, okay, these events started, let's say right when John started writing, and over the last 2,000 years, the book of Revelation has been unfolding. So where, at what point in history are these things taking place? That's what a historicist how a historicist reads it. Then there's idealists. This is what makes it difficult. I was talking to somebody just last week, and they were saying if you have 3 people in a room, you're going to have 12 different opinions on the book of Revelation. So not only is there a different opinion for every person who reads the book of Revelation, each person who reads it has themselves many different opinions about what's going on. The idealist, though, I spelled that wrong. There's an A in here. The idealist says, okay, Revelation is not so much events that are happening in history, but it's kind of how history unfolds. So the big battles in the good versus evil that we see in the book of Revelation, an idealist will read that and say, yeah, this is all kind of metaphorical to just the way the world works. They'll see the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that we're going to look at in a little bit, and they'll say, one of them is war, and one of them is famine, and one of them is death. And they'll say, yeah, that's what happens. That's what happens when the 4 horsemen ride out. So you wouldn't ask, an idealist wouldn't ask, well, when did those horsemen come out? The way the historicist might, or which horsemen are we on now? They would say, no, that's just what happens in the world. So an idealist. What's another way people look at it? Oh, this one's very interesting. Maybe you've heard about people that do this. And this one's actually very interesting. Oh, preterist. There we go. I put a C in there. A preterist. What does a preterist say? A preterist says the things you read in the book of Revelation already happened. This all happened in the past. Now, most preterists would not say everything in the book of Revelation happened in the past, because at the very end of Revelation, you can see the new heavens and the new earth. Preterists will typically say most of the book of Revelation is talking about the Roman Empire. It's talking about things that happened in John's day, and not so much things that are going to happen throughout history, not so much things that are metaphors, but all these things happened. And typically they'll say up to 70 AD. 70 AD is when the temple was destroyed. The Romans came in and destroyed the Jewish temple. So that's an interesting view, isn't it? It's not one we hear of very much, that Revelation is not a book about the future, but it's a book about something that already happened. And there are some preterists. These guys are there are some preterists that say when John is talking about the new heavens and the new earth, even that has already happened. Like we're living in the new heavens and the new earth. Kind of that's kind of strange. Some preterism is okay. I think there are. I think, and when we look in the book of Revelation, we're going to see things that John is clearly. He's talking about the Roman Empire pretty clearly, but I think it's also pretty obvious that there are things that are yet to come. But maybe I'm showing my cards too early. What's the fourth view? Fourth view may be the most popular. The Futurist View. The Futurist is kind of the opposite of the preterist. The Futurist says, we're going to read the book of Revelation to find out what will happen. So the Futurist looks at the book of Revelation and thinks none of this has happened yet, right? This is all in the future. Preterist, it's all in the past. Futurist, it's all in the future. So which one of these is right? Well, I suppose that's up to you. I think they all have good things about them. I think I'm not sure that John, the writer, intended us to be any one of these things. I think he's trying to be all of them. And we're going to kind of see how that works. Well, you know what? We kind of already did see how it works. Because remember when John talked about the Antichrist? And he said, the Antichrist will come, and even now there are many Antichrists here. And people who are Antichrist and deny that Jesus came in the flesh and deny that Jesus is from God, they are the Antichrist. So even that to me sounds like a mixture of all of these. Yes, Antichrist will come in the future. They are here now. Anybody who's speaking in the spirit of the Antichrist is the Antichrist, and we can look and see Antichrist around us today, John says, and throughout history, I'm sure we could. So I think there's something to be said for all of these things. But the important thing I would say is it's not strictly any one of these things. I don't think it's not strictly futurist, because as we'll see, there are some things that clearly happened. He's clearly talking about the Roman Empire. I don't think it could be all in the past, because I think very clearly there's things that have yet to come. We do see that these events in the book of Revelation happen throughout history. I mean, it describes a pattern of events and how things unfold, the battle of good and evil throughout history. And again, yeah, like I said, throughout history, you can see things that he's clearly prophesying about specific things and specific people in history. So they're all good. All right, where are we at now? We're coming on half an hour, Chad, and you've been babbling on, and you haven't even got into the book of Revelation yet. Let's see what we can do here. I'm going to go through the cast of characters and explain the cast of characters as fast as I can and as best I can. Remember to put your questions in there. So who are these people? This is a good way to start, I think, in the book of Revelation. Make sure we're clear on who these people are that show up. John. Who's John? Oops, what have I done? John is the author. Okay? He was an apostle of Jesus. The apostle John, he was a disciple. He was exiled on the island of Patmos for being a Christian. And presumably he died there. We're not really sure what exactly happened with John, but on the island he got a revelation of Jesus Christ. And he wrote it down and sent it to 7 churches. He is the author of the book. You will see John show up. If you read the Gospels, you'll see John all throughout the Gospels. John is the guy, although there's some people that argue about this, but John is the guy who wrote the book of John, or the Gospel of John, right? The story of Jesus' life. He also wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, which were letters to different churches. Not Revelation, but different letters. Okay, so John is the author. Okay, and he shows up as a character in the book of Revelation, because the book of Revelation, it's like an angel is showing him all these different things. And John says, I looked and I saw, or I looked and I saw and I heard. You'll see that a lot in the book of Revelation. I looked and I saw this and I heard this. I saw this and I heard this. That's a little teaser. That's a key for understanding the book of Revelation, because a lot of people, well, we'll get into that. There's another main character in the book, the Lamb. Who is the Lamb? Any clues on who this Lamb might be? When John looks and sees the Lamb, he says, I looked and I saw a lamb as if it were slain. And the Lamb, we find out pretty early on, he's very clear about this, is Jesus. Like Revelation might be confusing, but there's no question that this lamb who was slain and is now alive is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. The lamb and the lion are the same one, and it's Jesus. He's very clear about that. Let me point to you a couple places in the book of Revelation that talk about Jesus. And again, he opens the book saying this is a revelation of Jesus. And here at the very end of the book, Jesus speaks up and he talks about himself. He shows up as the lamb throughout the book of Revelation. And he also shows up as the lion. He shows up as Jesus. He shows up as all these things, riding a horse with a sword coming out of his mouth. We'll talk about all that stuff. But here's what Jesus says about himself. It's very interesting. This is the very end of Revelation, Revelation 22:12. Look, Jesus says, I am coming soon. My reward is with me, and I will give to each person according to what they have done. This is Jesus talking. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. And here's how I know it was Jesus, because he says, here, pay attention, I, Jesus, have sent my angel to give you this testimony for the churches. He's writing to the churches. And here's who else Jesus is. I am the root and the offspring of David and the bright morning star. It's interesting. He says, who does Jesus say he is? The Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Okay? Who else is the Alpha and the Omega, though? This is kind of fascinating. In the beginning of the book of Revelation, this is what John hears. I am the Alpha and the Omega, says who? Says the Lord God, who was, or who is, and who was, and who is to come, the Almighty. Kind of the same thing as the first and the last, right? In the beginning and the end. That's what Alpha and Omega is. It's the first and last letter of the Greek alphabet. So Alpha, Omega, first and last. But look who else, look who the Alpha and Omega is. The Lord God. It's very clear. There are some people who go out, I don't want to say they go out in the spirit of the Antichrist, but people who deny that Jesus is God, right? Jesus was a great person, or he's a nice person. There are some churches even that teach that he's like an angel or something. Jesus says he's the Alpha and the Omega, and the Lord God is the Alpha and the Omega, right? Jesus is the first and the last. The Lord God is the first and the last. Well, I'm just want to make it clear to everyone that Jesus is God. And anybody who says that, well, Jesus never claimed to be God, or the Bible doesn't really say Jesus is God. Yeah, yep. Look, it says it right here. Are you reading it? Read Revelation 22:12 and read Revelation 1:8. Same book, the beginning of the book and the end of the book. God, Jesus, Alpha and the Omega, same thing. Just want to make sure that's clear. Maybe that's a topic for another Whiteboard Wednesday, but don't listen to someone who denies that Jesus is God, or who would deny that it's not in the Bible. It is. The seven churches, again, that's who John is writing to. And if you want to read the first 3 chapters of the book of Revelation, he says what those 7 churches are. Those are churches that existed, that he's writing to. Some people, the historicist, remember the historicist who looks at the book of Revelation as taking place throughout history? They would say that each of those 7 churches is a period of church history since John wrote. So this one church, the Church of Philadelphia, that's the early church. And the Church of Ephesus, that stands for the Middle Ages, Church of the Middle Ages. I'm pretty iffy on that. I think they're very clearly actual churches, with actual things going on in those churches. So the 7 churches are just the churches that John sent the letter to. This group here, this makes up the bulk of the book, if I could say that. There are 7 angels that come. There's 7 seals. Actually, there's way more than 7 angels. I should put that. There's angels all over the place in the book of Revelation. We'll look at a lot of them. There's 7 seals. The angels break open the 7 seals and things happen. When they first start breaking open the seals, each seal is a horseman that comes out. One of the 4, we call it 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. There's 7 trumpets, and also, I forgot to write this down, there's 7 bowls. And this opening of the 7 seals, the blowing of the 7 trumpets, and the pouring out of the 7 bowls make up kind of the bulk of the book of Revelation. What do those mean? We'll get to that next week, probably. We'll probably concentrate on that. Here's a question that people ask. Here's another character, the 144,000. Who are the 144,000 that show up in the book of Revelation? the Jehovah's Witness, if you ever heard the Jehovah's Witness, they would say that the 144,000 are there's 144,000 people that are going to be in heaven. There's 144,000 saved. Once we've hit that number, we're done, right? And then they go out and evangelize, trying to get more people in. And people ask, well, why are they trying to get more people in? Just, what happens if we're going to overflow? But who are these 144,000? Well, these 144,000 show up a couple times. In Revelation 7 is when they first show up. Well, they show up a couple times early, but it specifically says who they are in chapter 7. This is John writing, and he hears this voice: "Do not harm the land or the sea or the trees until we put a seal on the foreheads of the servants of God." He says, "Then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel." Okay, so the 144,000 are the servants of God. After this I looked, John says, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. So that's Jesus, right? The throne of the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hand. Now, it talks over and over again about this 144,000. It's not a specific number, and I'm pretty confident in that. Why? Well, remember what I said about how Revelation says you see things and then you hear things. John sees and then he hears. Look at, I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count. Now this is the same group of people. Why did he give one number here and say here it's a great multitude that no one could count? Because, again, and this is what we're going to look at. We'll also look at this next week. The book of Revelation uses images and it uses numbers in a very special way. And you'll see throughout the book that the way John uses numbers is very specific. He's got a specific meaning here. And so the 144,000 it's like 12 times 1,000 times 1,000 or something like that. So out of Israel, out of the true Israel, it's everyone who it stands for, basically, this great multitude that no one could count. So if you're worried that the heaven's going to be only room for 144,000, all you've done really is you've mixed up John's imagery and numbers as something that's literal. This number just stands for a great multitude that no one could count. Remember, he hears this number, and then when he looks and sees what it is, what that number signifies, he sees a great number that no one could count. So don't worry that you're going to run out of room or whatever. You're too late to get a ticket. That's just kind of a misinterpretation. But the 144,000 are those who are servants of Christ, servants of God. They are the true Israel, as Paul says in the book of Galatians. And then we have here the woman clothed in the sun. I see him at about 40 minutes here, and we didn't even get to the bad guys yet. I may wrap it up here, and then we'll start it again next. I bit off more than I could chew here with the book of Revelation. But who's the woman clothed in the sun? Here's another good guy character. She shows up in chapter 12. John says he saw a great sign appear in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. Here again is all imagery that we can look at later. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. She gave birth to a son, a male heir, who will, quote, rule all the nations with an iron scepter. That's a quote from the Old Testament. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. Now, this child, a male child, is referring to Jesus. Jesus is the one who will rule all nations with an iron scepter. Her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. Clearly, this is Jesus. It's when it talks about to God and to his throne in the book of Revelation, it's talking about Jesus there sitting on the throne. It's referring to Jesus' death and his ascension into heaven. So, this woman gives birth to a son. So a couple different interpretations on who this could be, the woman clothed in the sun. I think it's probably referring to Israel, the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel is bringing about the Messiah. So God is working through the Jewish people, the Hebrews, for all of history to bring to the culmination the Messiah, the one who is going to fulfill all things and complete all things and bring all things to atonement. And this is the Messiah. And where does the Messiah come from? He comes from Israel. So the whole purpose of that people, of God's people, is to bring about the fulfillment of the world, fulfillment of the destiny of the world. And it's the Messiah that does that. So there are some Catholics who say that this is Mary, because Mary literally gave birth to Jesus. But, there's some of the imagery here. It seems like it's talking about Israel. Here's the woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. This is all Old Testament imagery. 12 stars probably refers to the 12 tribes of Israel. And it's not so much that Israel is literally giving birth to Jesus, although that literally happened, but that, Israel is, Jesus is the fulfillment. Israel is, in a sense, giving birth to Jesus because Jesus is from Israel. So I guess there's where we'll stop. I don't want to get you guys too tired about talking about Revelation. I meant to get into more stuff, but we'll stop here. We looked at the good guys, and next week we will look at the bad guys. Here's a sneak preview. Remember, though Antichrist is not in there, I think one of these guys does line up with who the Antichrist who is to come is. So which one is it? Find out next week when we continue looking at the book of Revelation. We're going to look at the bad guys, how symbols work, how numbers work, and we're going to look at the structure of the book of Revelation. I think that's going to be pretty exciting because it can be confusing, but once you see how it's structured, a lot of things fall into place. So thanks for tuning in. We dove in deep, but that's what you guys wanted. So, hey, let's dive in deep to the book of Revelation. Look forward to continuing to be with you guys. Put your questions, comments, and concerns there in the chat, or message me, and we'll get to them in future videos. All right, God bless. Take care.